Hi, Lisa. Well,
Hi.
hi. Let me introduce you, give you a proper introduction. Lisa Pachence is an executive life and leadership coach to big-hearted, high achievers who crave extraordinary lives, incredible impact, and badass well-being. As an elite coach for coaches, entrepreneurs, and executives, Lisa brings deep insights, practical tactics, and masterful partnership to enact transformative life and business changes. She's a professional certified coach, speaker, author of Success in Any Season, and founder of LP Coaching and Consulting, offering designer coaching to clients such as Google executives, startup founders, and entrepreneurs, and has been featured internationally acclaimed podcasts and other venues. And I'm very happy to welcome Lisa. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephen. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Great, great. So let me start off by you emphasize helping women thrive as business leaders and owners. What do you find helpful in specifically focusing on women?
Well, I started focusing on women leaders and business owners because I am one. I think a lot of times people go into the coaching and helping profession because in some way, shape, or form, they want to be able to provide the support that they got or didn't get at some point in their lives. But also, women are still a very underutilized, underpaid, undersupported group of undertapped power in the US and around the world. There's lots of statistics. Women tend to score a little bit higher in terms of EQ, in terms of emotional intelligence. I actually love this quote. The Dalai Lama said in 2010 that the world will be saved by the modern woman. Love that quote, meaning that major world issues like poverty, inequality, war, mental health, all of these things are best solved by that balance of masculine and feminine leadership, that compassion and logic, heart and power. And a lot of the personal development world is about pairing those two things together. How do they overlap? How do they come together? And so if you're tapped into the trending topics in leadership across corporate America, what companies are clamoring for are really for more transparency, authenticity, communication, equity, the nurturing environments that in our modern economy is actually what's needed. All qualities that feminine leadership tend to have naturally. Now, women's leadership has very, very much developed over, the course of my life and your lifetime in the last century, but women are still paid less than men, and only 12% of CEOs in Fortune 500 companies are women. So the gap is large, but the good news is that women-owned businesses are growing 2.5 times faster than the national average. And so I really want to keep this going. And in my work with women, what I focus on is this desperate call for more connection, to be seen, to be heard, to be connected on a different level than just the transactional conversation. We want to have deeper conversations, but we're not trained to do that in our culture. So, there's this perpetual dysfunction of avoidance and comfort that happens in our economy. I mean, you see this happening with all the products and the websites that come out. Everything is built towards avoiding things that are painful and bringing more comfort. But we are then less positioned to be resilient to things that are painful, that are difficult, that take longer than an immediate gratification. And my experience is that women actually help to close this gap by filling roles such as coaches, therapists, guidance counselors, being in more personal development. And women actually take up more space in the personal development industry, about 73%, and tend to practice more personal development in the business world. All these things that I think are great, doesn't matter who you are or how you identify, they're good things to implement. And so I tend to back the people that are hungry for the type of change that I'm also excited for.
Yeah, that's very well said. And, I'm a big believer in the notion of balance. And you don't want to get too much in one direction or another direction. And I think there is this very important contribution that women in the feminine process offers in the business community: connection, relationship, etc., revealing, being more connected to their feelings, these things that in my own work I found when you bring it to the men, it helps them grow tremendously. It's an important aspect of their growth. So I completely agree with what you're saying, and it also is part of the through line of all the conversations we're having so far this morning.
I love that.
Let me ask you, what would you say are the common pitfalls or blind spots you encounter in executives you work with? And how would you address them? How do you address them?
Yeah. Executive coaching work spans across so many different topics and so many different issues, as I'm sure you have experienced as well. You can go into a conversation and start talking about time management, and all of a sudden be speaking to an incident that happened when you were 5, and you went, whoa, what just happened there? But the main job of a coach, no matter whether you're working with executives, leaders, or with someone who's a single mom running a household, it's always the same. Our jobs as coaches is to reveal our clients to themselves and show where their strengths and their skills are already there as foundations to support them in the next step, whether that's resurfacing old skills or things that they forgot they had, or learning new ones. And I love talking about the topic of resiliency, which I know you're very, very deep into, because I personally feel that the coaching industry is specifically designed to create more resiliency. So my first answer to your question is that a lot of the work falls back into that self-awareness piece first and foremost. But when I work with executives, oftentimes the pain points and the problems that they present which aren't usually the actual problems, those pain points usually show up as burnout and lack of purpose. So typically what I find underneath this, most commonly, not in every situation, are themes of perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and some sort of disconnect from their current patterns that might be sabotaging or interrupting themselves, or disconnect from the people that they need in order to support themselves. Our culture is also steeped in uber independence. And we think that there's some sort of award or medal we get from doing it all ourselves. And that's just, I think it's changing. I think that our culture is swaying more towards support and communication, but there's still this very deep-seated need to be seen as successful, a celebrity in our own right. So I work a lot with unwrapping this idea of perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and disconnect. And my belief is that heart-centered leadership is the way of the future. And you'll hear a lot of the gurus in personal development, like Simon Sinek, Brene Brown, Steven Sideroff, talking about heart-centered leadership and what that actually means. And, connecting to heart-centered leadership means unwrapping things like imposter syndrome, things like needing to get it right all the time, and going back to the roots of things like empathy and compassion first, and understanding who you're working with. I think a topic of conversation, especially recently with the pandemic, is this idea of bringing empathy even more into the workspace. And I'm a firm believer of that. I think that the old paradigm of leadership, which is more of the assembly worker, more of the numbers, the productivity, the ROI, the bottom line, all those things which are important, are not the most important thing. Business problems are always people problems disguised as business problems. So going back to the people connection and the empathy and the vulnerability, emphasizing empathetic leadership, say that 3 times fast, is so important. And that's what I tend to bring to the executives that I work with. And that does tend to tap into and break through perfectionism, because perfectionism really is, it's the gnarly underbelly of excellence. It's the dark side of striving for excellence. And excellence is a great thing to strive for, but perfectionism is really built on this idea of avoiding getting it wrong and fear and shame, instead of the purpose, the drive, the passion, the mission. All of that is heart-centered leadership. So this heart-centered leadership comes up over and over and over again in my work, and tends to be the place that we come back to in my work with the female leaders that I work with. I can go on and on. Actually, I want to end with one last thing on this topic. Yuval Harari, who wrote *Sapiens*, has the most amazing quote in his book. He says that the modern human tension is based on the fact that we have prehistoric brains, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. So we're suffering the side effects of business theories that are left over from our medieval past, where we treat others like cogs in a wheel, and it's short-sighted. So of course, people feel burnt out. We lose purpose. We lose motivation, and no one can stay motivated by consequences for that long, and no one can stay motivated by perfectionism for that long, because it's all fear and self-shaming. Yeah.
Those are amazing points. Very good. I like the way you noted the different time frames, medieval, et cetera, because a lot of times when I talk about resilience, I'm talking about how we still have the stress response mechanism of our hunter-gatherer ancestors. So we get stressed, and the response is to go into the fight or flight, where we need to go and either fight or run from the danger, but we're sitting behind a desk on the phone, and we're having to hold it all in. So mind-body connection and realizing where the place of balance is very important. You're talking about the imposter syndrome, and you're talking about fear, and how both of those can drive behavior or lack of behavior. And what I find with the imposter syndrome, and coming from a place of fear, is that when we cover up to not notice our feelings, we're not able to be selective with that. And so you talked about recognizing people's gifts and strengths. When we block, we're not selective, and so we block our awareness of our gifts and strengths. And so that becomes a very important part of breaking through that imposter syndrome, is to be able to connect to, as you said, the things that we do well.
Absolutely. I love that. And connecting to them as a baseline is so important, but then using them and actually setting goals that are aligned with those strengths and those ways of power that are unique to you, and self-actualizing from that place can completely eradicate imposter syndrome. But in the normal corporate culture, we're given goals and projects that don't align with our strength, or don't align with what we want, or don't align with our passions. And therefore it creates this paradigm of imposter syndrome, because we're not using our strengths. We're trying to hide the fact that we think we don't have strengths in this area. And then we're operating from a place of urgency on things that aren't important. And not everything that's important is urgent, and not everything that's urgent is important.
Yeah. Sometimes what I notice is that people who have this imposter syndrome notice what fits with that syndrome. They notice their mistakes, but when they're doing something successfully, they say, oh, well, that was coincidence, it was luck, or they dismiss it and don't fully take those positive results in. Very important to own your successes.
Oh, I love that conversation, especially for high performers, because high performers tend to step over their wins and go straight to the next thing, on to the next thing. That drive, that excellence keeps them from seeing the positives, and therefore we don't get used to the resiliency of being in process. We just want to go to the next thing, next thing, next thing, instead of noticing the progress, celebrating the wins, and getting that hit of dopamine that means, oh, we did something good. Let's do it again. I think celebrating the wins is just as great of a measure of feedback as looking at our gaps in our next goals.
Yeah, beautiful. I totally agree. You make a comment at one point, your life was like falling upstairs. I took that to refer to sort of being on automatic and awakening from that to gain greater control and direction of your life. Did I get it right? And can you speak about that and how that might be something that a lot of people that you work with experience?
Absolutely. It's so funny whenever someone reflects falling up the stairs, or when I reflect it to someone else, I immediately get this visual of someone banging their shins as they're going up the stairs. And that's kind of what I experienced in my career for a very long time. And before that, I was in athletics. I was a high-level soccer player from a very young age. And I was always steeped in this culture of high performance, because that's just where I was. That was the bar that was set. I would reach that bar, and all of us would reach that bar together. And falling up the stairs for me was really about having a path that, maybe I chose to begin with because of some interest and curiosity, like high-level soccer. But then the bar and the goals were set for me by someone else, and then someone else, and then someone else. And then falling up the stairs ends up being this experience of following another path, something that someone else laid out for me, or that I think I should be doing, and working towards that, but not feeling like I've earned it because I wasn't passionate about it. And that imposter syndrome would come in because I wasn't making and setting goals based on what I wanted and based on my natural passions and strengths. I think a lot of people go through this. A lot of high performers experience this, where life seems to be going well for that person, but you don't have that sort of, you're not at the wheel. Somehow you got in the passenger seat, and all of a sudden you see the success and you say, and this is where golden handcuffs come in. People fall up the stairs so far that they get these golden handcuffs, and they go, well, but I'm here, but I don't want to be here, and I shouldn't not want to be here.
Yeah.
So
when I work with people who are burnout, that's the reason. They're very successful, but they've lost their passion, and it's become drudgery.
100%. Yeah, that the conversation about burnout, I think, is such a necessary one to have. I was doing some research on this recently for a talk that I was giving, and I think it was Harvard Business Review did a study this past year in 2020 to take a look at burnout, and over 75% of the current work population felt burnt out for a number of different reasons. And actually, I tend to refer to this article quite often. Harvard Business Review also did a study in 2017 on the nature of burnout. And part of it was this idea of self-actualization, going after something that wasn't actually connected to what you want. But they said that the number one issue that caused burnout was loneliness. It was disconnect. And I actually take this to mean disconnect, not just from people, but also from your purpose, from your passion. And so, in this day and age, people are burnt out because they're disconnected from others, but they're also disconnected from what they really want. And the best way to get people to be productive is to train them, connect with them, and have them work on things that matter. And so these issues are so complementary. They're such a win-win.
Yeah, I totally agree. And another one that is also complementary to this, one of the keys to your success is in guiding women to rediscover their authentic power.
Mm-hmm.
Apply it in all aspects of their life. What are you referring to by authentic power?
Yeah, I actually have a group coaching program that's based on this. Authentic power, owning your power, and what it means to overcome imposter syndrome. And really, that's what authentic power is about. It means getting past perfection, imposter syndrome, and things that keep us in high cost games like comparison and going after something they think they should do. And it means being leaders in our own life. That's our authentic power, taking responsibility for how things go, being real with what we're great at, being real with what we're bad at, seeking support of others. I think it's vastly important because women, more so than men, tend to go into fields that impact social economy, and they make a big difference. So to support specifically women to find their authentic power and then to go out and see them succeeding, building nonprofits, giving back, raising money, becoming coaches, becoming leaders, it has this ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
And so I talk a lot about perfectionism as the thing to interrupt to get to your authentic power. And I think everyone has a degree of perfectionism. It's this idea that we're scared to get it wrong. And perfectionism isn't built to get things right per se. It's built to avoid making ourselves wrong or avoid getting it wrong. And it's a faulty motivator. It tends to create burnout as well when it becomes accidentally ingrained as the default way to get things done. And I love Brene Brown. I don't know if you're familiar with Brene Brown's work. She talks a lot about perfectionism and interrupting that. And specifically, she talks about shame resilience. So the inner resiliency to our own automatic make wrongs of ourself. And I think that diving deep, unwrapping that, and being with whatever voices there are that make us wrong, realizing that it's just, an influencing machine that's trying to get us to do something. It doesn't actually work very well.
Mm-hmm.
And then building out a new motivation is really what drives authentic power, because then we can start to look at, well, what do we want? How do we want to motivate ourselves? Maybe by love, maybe by play, maybe by joy or passion or being with others. We can find our core values from that place.
Yeah. I like when you say that we all have a little bit of perfectionism.
Or a lot.
Or a lot. I like when it's possible to take something and recognize that we all have it, so that it takes the stigma away from it and allows us to look at it a little bit more readily. So the other word for that for me would be acceptance. To be accepted. Okay, I have it now. How do I want to deal with it? Rather than, as Brown would say, the shame of it. Okay, acceptance in some ways is the antidote to shame. So we can acknowledge that the issues that we have, most people have, all people have, and so we can at least have as a starting point a greater acceptance of our flaws or our issues that we have to deal with.
Yeah, I entirely agree. I think acceptance is a huge part of the path of high performers when they want to rise in leadership. Practicing acceptance, especially in accepting our gaps, and then looking at, okay, well, do we want to do something about those gaps, about those voices, about those fears, or do we want to set it aside because it's not that important?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lisa, we have about one more minute. Let me ask you one last question. In a time when the issues of equality and justice are being addressed, how does your work support these efforts?
This is such a great question, and I'm so glad that this was lined up to be talked about. I'll try to be brief. So my belief is that coaching helps us strengthen our ability to be with change, to be flexible, open, resilient, receptive, curious, empathetic, all those things. And it's all necessary if our culture is to drive the transformation that's needed to systemically change the injustices that are happening. And this topic is a great conversation. I think that the national voice that diversity, equity, and inclusion was given in 2020 is very late to the party, but it's very needed. And as a leadership coach, I help shine a light on what's not being said, what's not being done, and not being considered. And so because it's my job to help find these blind spots, it's really helpful for all of my clients, all the organizations across the board, to take a look at their biases, whether they're systemically created biases or personally created biases, doesn't matter. And look at, okay, well, is that who I want to be? Is that what matters? Is that aligned? Most of the time it's not.
Right, right.
So given that I work with female high performers to bring more heart and purpose to their work, of course, this gets folded into the conversation, the humanness, the openness, the building teams that are productive based on diversity. And I think the more diverse any conversation, the better off you'll be at finding a result and an answer that really, really works. That's creativity right there.
Great answer. Thank you very much. Lisa, it's been a pleasure to spend the last half hour with you. It's been
Same.
I loved all of your perspectives. Thank you very much. And I'll look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It was a pleasure to talk to you today. And thanks so much for